I'm Greg Brooks. I'm CEO at SearchTides. Very excited to be here. I'd love to just kind of do a quick around with our guests and co-hosts. I'm just going to go in the order that I see y'all on my screen. So we're basically going to just super quick intro about ourselves, and then just share one, casually one thing we've never shared about ourselves on a recorded video before. So Brian, we'll start with you. Derek, Shane, Ron, take it from there.
Hi, I'm Brian. I built and ran the SEO team for Wayfair back when Wayfair was just becoming Wayfair. Later moved on to run SEO for Houzz, and currently running SEO and web content for Age of Learning. And let's see, back in my misspent youth, I once spent many a late night having long late night phone calls with George R.R. Martin.
Nice. That's great.
Derek Wu. I am the director of SEO and ASO at Albertsons Companies, which is the grocery store chain that encompasses things like Safeway, Shaw's, Vons, Jewel-Osco. So pretty much a pretty big footprint across the USA. One of the things that I have never said on recorded video was the pit bosses at Mandalay Bay once asked me to leave the casino and not come back to play blackjack because they suspected I was counting cards.
And were they right?
I won't comment on that. I will plead the fifth.
Shane Hampton here. I'm the director of SEO at iLeverage. My background in SEO is been really rewarding. I've got to work with some really big pharmaceutical companies, one of the biggest pizza chains in the world. And, my last gig was at Neighborly, which is a big home services company. So a lot of background in small business, enterprise SEO, and I'm really excited to be amongst this elite group of panelists. Thanks for having me. Oh yeah, this is the tough part. I think this is kind of like a self-truth. This is like a safe space. I should probably give up food challenges. I always watch YouTube and I'm like, oh, these guys, these people, I'm way bigger than them. I could do this, and I never win. So I should probably give up that dream. It's probably healthier for me, and it's a safe place amongst friends. I should probably let that dream die.
I appreciate that. With that being said, is there a favorite food that you like to have in the food contest?
I've done in San Diego, where Ron is. There's a place called Ryan's 24 Cafe. There, it's massive. It's like a huge pancake, like a pound of eggs, like a pound of bacon. Huge. It's massive, and I made it to like 20%. I made it to one pancake and like some of the bacon and some of the eggs, and yeah, I felt sick the rest of the day. Went to a Chargers game later that day. They're playing the Colts. A couple of my friends. I felt sick like halfway through. I was like, guys, I'm thinking I'm gonna dip out the second half. Like I feel terrible. So.
That's fantastic.
Ron Weber. I am a senior director of web and SEO at Actian. So we're a big data company. I've been in the tech space some 10 years in-house. Some brands I've worked on, Quicken, Mint, which is now gone, sadly, but worked at Intuit for a bit. So, and I also teach at UC San Diego. The one thing that I've never admitted to anyone, let alone publicly, I have watched all 46 seasons of Survivor.
Who's your favorite character?
Anymore. It's a terrible show now.
You would only recommend the first 37 seasons, you feel like, or yeah, okay, yeah. Well, thanks everyone for sharing that. In the spirit of sharing, also, I was actually going to talk about that I might be banned from at least one casino in Las Vegas, but I feel like that spice sort of left itself a little bit. I'm double jointed in my left pinky. I don't think I'm going to show it, but I can have my pinky go and touch basically my hand.
I think you have to show it. Otherwise,
okay.
know?
Well, okay, here we go.
You need to see it.
Yeah, this is a look away warning for anybody who's there. It is. That's it. Okay. Yeah. It's more explicit when you actually see it versus when it lives in your head, I think. So, well, thanks everybody for sharing and for the intro. I'd love to just kick it off, Shane. What do you feel has recently changed in SEO, and what do you feel has kind of stayed the same?
I think it's a great question. I think the easiest one would be, Core Web Vitals. Google's updated that. and it's easy for people to overreact. That's a conversation I've had a lot of times. But at the same time, I don't think it really has changed. I've always looked at Core Web Vitals as something that's really nice to have, something to aim for. But I think it's also relative, right, to your competition. So if you look at the SERP, whatever SERP you're looking at to try to dominate, and you look at your top 5 competitors, and if they're all failing and you're still passing, do you really need to spend a bunch of resources trying to accomplish something that you're already winning at? Each person's going to make their own decision on that, but it's one thing that's changed, but it hasn't changed. And I think that's kind of a good overlay for the SEO communities in general.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I think it's fun because we get caught into this idea of like, what's the next, what's the next, what's the next, and then sometimes we just sort of forget some of the fundamentals. Ron, what do you sort of think in terms of what's a little different, what's a little same?
Yeah, I'll start with what I think is still the same, and it's people are still searching, despite rumors to the contrary that Google is dying. They're not, right? Just when we think they're dead, they're now going to hook up with Apple. Some 8.5 billion searches a day. They own 91% of the market. So Google's not dead. People are still searching for information. So that's what's not. What has changed, obviously, there's a race for AI. We have one long scrolling SERP where we didn't have that before. SGE is starting to roll out. I'm sure we'll talk about that as we move on. But agree with what Shane said. Things are still the same in many cases, but search has always been evolving, and I think we're just in that new evolution phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, how do you kind of see things?
I think definitely one of the newer things I've seen is some of the impacts of the helpful content update. In particular, like I've seen like e-commerce sites that have like at the bottom of this, right, at the bottom of the page, there's a bunch of SEO text. And then it's like, oh, now we're going to put a bunch of user-generated content in there. Oh, and now that's all about the FAQ schema. So we have so they have this huge section of content that's really just for SEO. And every piece of it was tested and was positive. And now they're just getting butchered by the helpful content update because their page is filled with junk that wasn't there for users. And so a little bit of Google created this problem because all that was only there because Google rewarded it. But now Google is starting to smack some of those traditional tactics down. I would say for not changed because like one thing that I think there's two ideas that are both true that as SEOs we have to hold in our heads. And one of them is that Google is getting just incredibly smart, incredibly sophisticated, and with a lot of these systems, like an incredible ability to determine what's actually good for the user, separate from traditional signals. And at the same time, Google is just unbelievably freaking stupid. And this, I remember back at Wayfair, we had a page for wood picture frames. We ranked really well. But one of our keywords was wooden picture frames. And we didn't even rank on the first page. And we realized it's because the page said wood and not wooden. So we just went to the page, put the word wooden in there a couple times, and ranking like one step below the wood. I checked this recently, still different SERPs for those two things, right? So like also unbelievably stupid. And that actually proved to be a scalable opportunity that we found with that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because thanks for sharing that. It's so interesting because, and especially with sort of the new AI elements of the Google algorithm, it is in very many different ways incredibly basic and straightforward. It's like version 1. It's like, if the word is not this, if you have a question and you don't have the answer explicitly put out here, no one knows what's going on. Is this word considered helpful? Yes or no? Derek, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts to add on to maybe what Brian was talking about. Like helpfulness has basically changed what is valuable. And now we have punishment in the exact same places where there used to be reward. How do you kind of adapt to that sort of environment?
So that's one of the things that has never changed and has always at the same time has always changed. I mean, it literally like everything is the same and different at the same time. With regard to that, and I like to think back to things like PageRank, when there used to be that little PageRank bar and people were trying to figure out, how do I get a 4 or better? How many backlinks should I buy? These are all things that when you figure out what Google is rewarding, here comes everybody with their schemes. Here comes everybody with the subplots that they're trying to sell to you, whether that's link building or it's checking your link authority or it's checking your page rank or, back in the early days, it was link popularity. And so when you talk about these snippets and these FAQs that Brian highlighted, naturally everyone gravitates to the next thing when it comes to search, and then Google eventually realizes that's being gamed and they cut it off, and that cat and mouse game will never change. It won't change with the rollout of SGE. It won't change with the rollout of AI. People will be trying to find a new way to sell a new product, to game the Google system, because, as Ron pointed out, it's still 91% of the world's search traffic. Wherever there's that kind of action, you're going to have a whole lot of people trying what we call black hat SEO. I think the things that never change is just having fantastic content that is useful to the surfer that you can deliver with relatively good speed. To Shane's point, the search signals are important. At the same time, you can overreact to them, but it's the delivery of a solid technical page with content that is actually useful to the user, and that will never change.
Not even when Google just serves that content through SGE?
Well, I mean, I think that what you're going to have is another mousetrap game, right? Cat and mouse here with content producers. So to a content producer, maybe the clicks, and I see a world where clicks start to matter less to a content producer and the impressions that they create for you in a Google search result start to matter even more. So you can see the next advent is going to be a group of people who want to start seeding content about your topics and your products to influence Google's SGE rollout, which, it taps into like Mashed and like Reddit and all of these different things. What you'll have are a lot of these content production houses gravitating towards now trying to sell you on the impression we're getting you in Google by writing about you and seeding content is the new value, just like buying links from us a long time ago was. But it's now about all impressions. And what they'll try to do is say, hey, look, our article mentioned you in this thing about 1 billion times across all of these different forums, and now we've pushed you to the top of Google, and you can see the SGE snippets referring to you underneath it. That's the new value add we have. And that's the same repeating game you're going to see. You saw a version of this when Google first came out with link popularity. You will see this with content seeding for SGE. And you will also see SEOs looking at the places. If you notice, Google just bought Reddit, all of the content from Reddit. Okay, so now you're going to have a lot of people going in there, seeding that, trying to create their own product, which will be mentioning your stuff across a lot of different media and trying to influence the impressions that are being delivered to you from Google. So I still see a world where they're going to start trying to sell you on the impressions that their content creates for your retail products.
It is funny. I had a conversation with a content agency yesterday. And I said, if you can deliver content that will get me into SGE, then we might have something I can sell upwards. But we literally had that conversation yesterday. That is, you're right. That will be the next advent of where we're going.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? When it comes to SGG in the current state, it depends, right? You see a lot of long tail queries. So what is that going to impact when it comes to like your clients or your stakeholders you're reporting to? Obviously upper funnel searches. So a lot of your blog queries, maybe those are impacted. But there's things that you can do if you're a local business owner, you're a regional player. Like for example, if the search term dentist or lawyer, when it's in SGE, it still populates the map pack, right? So if you have UTM parameters on there to measure those clicks, you shouldn't see impact too much there in terms of like the clickability. But my words of advice would be, I would caution everybody to chase impressions. It's a dangerous game because at the end of the day, as an SEO, it's already hard for us to prove value or ROI or ROAS compared to like our paid search counterparts who have like hard numbers to work with every single day, every single week, every single month. So if you're just chasing impressions and then it comes down to the contract negotiation or the re-up at the end of the year, how much ROI did you drive? Like, well, I can't really tell you that, but we increased your impressions by 100x. It's like, well, then how come our sales are plus 2% or down 5%? So I would, I definitely agree with what you're saying, Derek, and I can see that conversation going. History always repeats itself. So, and we'll talk about this later, but AI content, these LLM models, it's different than, what SEO nuke used to be in word spinners. It's more advanced, but it's cut from the same cloth, right? So I think we have to be careful with falling into the same pitfalls that led us to Panda and Penguin, 12, 13 years ago.
Oh,
Because
I
history will
agree
repeat
with you
itself.
on that. What I'm telling you, Shane, is no matter how much you want to caution people, this is coming.
Oh, it absolutely
People will
is.
be trying to. I mean, that's what I'm saying is it's just it's new tactic, same end goal. And you're going to have companies that appear doing that. And I agree with you cautioning people on this because you will end up being a victim to Penguin or Florida or Jaeger or whatever when you are relying on the next hot trend and technique. So again, just going back to having good organic content, like respecting the surfer, understanding the surfer's intent, having an actual product that people really like, that they're out there talking about it for you. Those are the things you can't escape. And I think trying to game the system again only puts you in a position to become the victim of a serious windfall because you will see people that gravitate to these trends, they will ascend to new heights, and then this update rolls out, and then it's, oh my God, 40% of my traffic's gone overnight. So I'm absolutely with you on that. And I would just say again, be very aware that this game never changes. Okay, whatever the new trend is, somebody is going to be trying to sell a product that guarantees you to climb up the charts, and it's going to be this content will seed for you here, and that content will seed for you here, and all this great UCG. At the end of the day, have a good product, have
Sometimes
good things to say about the product, and just trust the you can stand on that. And if you're playing all of these other games, at the end of the day, it just might be that you don't have a very good product. So, that's and I'm sorry, the truth hurts.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's sorry, please go ahead.
oh yeah, I was gonna say no, so I completely agree. I think that trying to get, particularly if you make like a product trying to so the best of searches is going to become a matter of influencing SGE at some point. That said, I think a lot of informational sites are going to get hammered pretty hard by SGE, just in the way you used to be able to sell ad impressions by saying, hey, here's how many teaspoons are in a tablespoon, and how many tablespoons are in a cup. And then that went away because Google just answered it. Like now, when I am looking for like, oh, what USDA zone is this plant? Or, oh, who is the 23rd president? And things that I once often be clicking through to Wikipedia or to some site to get just a quick summary answer. It's not important. It's not health information, which I wouldn't trust SGE for. But like, I'm very skeptical of SGE's quality. And I find once I turn it on, there are so many of these things. I'm like, I don't really care not that much about whether it's right or not. If it's right 80% of the time, I'm good. And like the amount of sites that I click through for that content has dropped radically. Just even in this like crappy version of Google's SGE. And so I think a certain kind of site is going to really have to fundamentally change the kind of content they make to really start getting to that deeper content that you can't just give like a nice little one paragraph answer to.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's always this push and pull between, and I think it's kind of where y'all are exactly at with what you're saying. There's a push and pull between what we would call foundational, fundamental, always was important, always is important, always will continue to be important. And then this thread of disproportionate results in the medium term or in the short term. And there's sort of a balancing game between both of those. And I think that is intersecting broadly. And Ron, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It's intersecting broadly with I think we're having a conversation about measurement and value now. We're like, hey, is this thing valuable? Is this thing measurable? And the only thing that's happened with consumer behavior over time is it's become more complex and more fragmented in how it operates across marketing channels. And so how we are creating things yesterday for Google, today for Google, also today for LLMs, also in the future for things in the, for things in the future. Creating content for things we'll never be able to actually quantify the results of because we won't see them. How do we operate, Ron, in a world like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's our managers care about usually today, right? So we have to have a way to measure what is the value of what we're doing today. But you're right. I think this panel's already said it. It's you've got to maybe think outside of what are we trying, who are we trying to write content for? And because that's evolving and changing, but what doesn't change is the user, right? And so I think that we don't know what future model we're actually writing to, but if we just continue to write for the user, we end up being in a good place. Similar to what Derek was saying, that we don't have to worry about these schemes right? Or I never worry about the algorithm updates. I never do. This one had me a little worried. I'm like, are they going to see our content as spammy? So the first thing I did, I went and made sure we didn't have any manual actions. But you're right. I mean, it's a complex issue, and I don't want to simplify it by just saying, hey, we're just focused on today. But again, if we just write for what our users care about, I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the central theme of what Google has attempted to do over time, and ironically, it's really worked in the SEO space, has been provide authentic value, actually care, actually try to be the best. And if you're not, you might be able to convince us otherwise for a little bit, but we're going to figure it out over time. And I think that's a tried and true formula for success. I like a little bit of spice mixed in the meantime to, elevate from both ends of it. But I do think, changing your points, understanding where the puck or the ball is today, and then also where it's going to be tomorrow. I'd love to zoom in and we can kick it off with you, Shane. So AI is obviously very embedded into everything that has to do with search, SGE, even if it is currently in its current state only available to people who have Google Labs opted in. And, meanwhile, my mom is still using MapQuest to get directions to places. So who knows what it'll actually wind up. But in terms of actionable tactical, like AI is very much embedded, yes, also in the work that we do individually and at the organizations that we're part of. How are you specifically, Shane, leveraging some of that currently?
Great question. And it's an interesting time that we live in, right? Because Google Bard, or let's start with ChatGPT, SEOs, right? Especially at a broad scale, are using ChatGPT to try to write content to rank better in Google, right? And Google rushed the release of Bard, in my opinion, to try to keep up with ChatGPT. So it's like this interesting time warp that we live in, where it's like chicken or the egg kind of a thing. So for me personally, I've invested a lot of money in a bunch of different SEO tools, from alt text to image alt text to metadata to even some interesting plugins that are for site speed, and a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different prompts. I'm still not willing to put my reputation on anything that I've tried for someone that's a paying client. The one thing that I use the most, probably religiously, are AI to content detection softwares. I do a lot of site auditing and a lot of page auditing, and it's pretty clear when you read something, you're like, this doesn't seem right, And so then I'll plug into an AI content generator or a checker, and that's one thing that I probably as a staple tool, more of a necessity than anything. But I personally am not using anything to advance like the actual implementation of anything on any sites. I just don't think I've found anything in my experience yet where I'm willing to make that switch full time. But I'm curious to see if any other panelists have, because I know it's the future. I know it's amongst us. Open my eyes, guys.
I feel like I'm very much in the same place as you, where I've like experimented with a bunch of stuff. None of it feels ready for the wild yet. I will say the best use of AI on a site I've ever seen is actually on Amazon. We're now on the Amazon reviews. They have an AI summary of all, those 2,000 user reviews. And so they have a little like, hey, here's a summary. People like this. They're mixed about this. People don't like this. And that I think is like a great use of AI to make something that's actually useful to users, as well as getting a lot of useful SEO related text on a page. But tool wise, like I've messed around with making some like custom GPTs that can do some like basic SEO auditing type stuff, but like none of it is, I've yet to find anything that's better than, an SEO's brain yet. And anything that works at scale still needs like a human to check its work, is my experience. But I also would be very excited if Ron or Derek has some amazing tools that I'm not familiar with.
Well, with regard to AI, we are testing, like everyone else. I'm testing our actual copywriter's writing versus the AI detection tool to see if it can really tell the difference between an AI and a human. And I hate to rain on people's parade, but those tools have flagged a lot of regular human beings as AI. So I'm not sure how much I trust the quality of the tools. Now, I will agree with Shane in the you can sniff out AI writing. It's pretty corny, pretty basic, unless somebody has really sculpted and taken the time to sculpt a persona using prompts, which makes it very difficult. So we've actually tested really developed AI prompts versus just a regular terminal versus a human writer. And if you do spend the time really developing an informational sheet for the persona you would like a writer to take on, it starts to seem more human, starts to fool some of those tools a little bit. And again, there is a margin of error. Don't take what those tools say as the absolute gospel, because you can test human writing against it and it'll flag human being writing as AI, depending on the voice of the writer. So some writers, an AI was modeled after good writing technique, right? So you're going to have some of the elements be redundant across a human user, and not so that, again, at the end of the day, is the content the AI generated useful to an end reader? And are you also being honest about it being AI? Those are the things that you want to flag out for an engine to make its decisions, is be truthful in what you are doing. And that's that echoes back to even sponsored content. It's just be truthful about that. Tell the surfer this was generated by AI. This is sponsored content. Now, when we talk about Amazon, for example, I'm just going to share my screen really quick. Can you guys see this? I do like the idea of taking AIs. Okay, and so when you take FAQ questions, the most Googled ones, and you have an actual product like our own brand's eggs. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so to Brian's point, with some of the things that Amazon does a really good job of is it reads all of the reviews. And then it highlights, okay, let me summarize what people liked about this product in a very quick abstract for you, based off of a question people ask. Are cage-free eggs better? Okay, so people Google questions like this. If you can tie that to a product and you can summarize actual users' opinions about that product, now you might have something useful to an end user. So those are kind of the experiments that I'm trying. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm sure that this works, or I'm not going to tell you that I'm positive. That's the whole thing about SEO, is you can either be somebody who's reading other people's books about riding a bike, where you can try riding a bike yourself and you can fall off of it and you can organically figure out how to ride a bike. I'm one of the people that says, I know that Neil Patel wrote lots of books about riding bikes and SEO and that we've all read them. At the end of the day, I want to know for myself, what does the AI tool really, really flag when it's trying to figure out who made user-generated content versus AI-generated content? And I want to test that with live users. When I'm summarizing reviews, I want to test them against the most asked questions regarding a product, because I still feel like answering that question and answering that question well and truthfully does have value. So where do I see the merits of something like AI? It's where you can summarize real opinions. To Brian's point, and really, we're all kind of thieves of Amazon's backyard, the way Bill Gates was stealing out of Xerox's trash. And so, in a sense, I'm looking at useful ways, right? The if people we're selling cage-free eggs and somebody is Googling a question about it, naturally, I would like our products to show up. So summarizing that with an article that uses user-generated opinions that is sensible and truthful is something that I want to test. But again, I'm not somebody that ever wants to take Neil Patel's word for it or anybody else's. I want to see that with my own eyes, because I believe that in SEO, the real creative ones, the ones that really figure this stuff out, they're bike riders. They're not people that read books about riding bikes. And there is a world of difference between SEOs that do that and SEOs that test their own stuff.
Yeah, and I think an important part of that is also tactic that works on one site does not necessarily work on another site, even though you think it should. Two e-commerce sites, hey, this worked great, I'm going to try it here. And so same thing, like people could be giving you really legitimately good advice that worked on their site, but if you don't test it and measure it, you don't actually know if that's gonna have the same impact.
I went to a SEO conference in November, and every speaker went up and said they were crushing it with AI content. I'm like, what am I missing? So I went back, I went into rapid development, created these personas to Derek's point. I think the good news for SEO, like none of my AI pages rank at all, right? So, and these are really advanced models that I experimented with. And I think, maybe it works on somebody else's site, but I took some comfort in that as an SEO. Like we cannot get away with just AI, generated content. And so, I think to summarize, I think this question, there is no magic tool out there. At least I haven't found one that can do this for us.
Yeah, it's really well said. And I think one thing that I just want to point out to everybody who's tuning in, like what you're hearing this continued push to stay zoomed out in terms of thinking about the big picture strategy, thinking about the big picture value that's trying to be created. And then, sure, zooming in at some point to talk about execution or tactics or things like that, but understanding that and even through experimentation and live R&D. So everyone on this call has talked about how they're in the trenches doing things, but simultaneously it's coming from a very conceptual, fundamental view about things like providing value to someone who's actually there. And I think one of the traps is getting caught in the weeds instead of just always kind of understanding the context from which you're operating. So I really love that. And I'll kind of add on top to what everyone has been saying. Native tools to do things instead of human beings. I don't know that they're there yet. Plug for the SearchTides April event. We are going to be going deep into a lot of the stuff that we do with ChatGPT. I can tell you that it is not about creation. It is about like observation and identifying and classification. And you can do things like remove fluff from an article or identify all the subtopics within an article and start to get a really good understanding of like what value is being provided from everywhere else. But that's way different than asking something to actually do the writing for you. I don't know, maybe GPT-10, it's there, but 4.0, not there yet today. That was really an interesting conversation. I think as we kind of think about this transition, and Ron, I'm actually going to kick it back to you, like what is going to only become more and more important over time?
Yeah, I never would have said this even 5 years ago, but I'm doubling down on UX. The first hire I had at Actian was a lead designer, UX expert, right? It is, when we think about INP and, where is Google heading with this, interaction to next paint, it's just a signal to say, are people engaging with your site? Yes or no? I just spent the last year redesigning our website. It went live in February. So I'm doubling down. I'm putting all my money on improving user experience. I don't, SEO's heard that in the past, right? UX is important. I never saw it in the data. I now take that back. It is very, very, it's critical.
And just to kind of follow up with you, Ron, is this something you're now seeing in the data, or you're just seeing like overwhelmingly anecdotally, or what's caused that shift for you?
Yeah, I am starting to see it in the data, and it's, I'm just even looking at core web vitals and not moving the needle as quickly as we want to, right? It should always just be a focus. And again, getting away from what Google wants, but it's better for users, right? And so why would we not focus on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, what do you sort of think in terms of where's all this going? What's going to become more important?
Yeah, one thing I'm seeing that seems to be becoming more important that I think is a little disappointing as an SEO is non-link related authority signals, in particular like branded searches, compound branded searches. And this has been a factor for a while. I ran an experiment at Wayfair where we actually made a TV commercial, an SEO TV commercial. And the point of the commercial was to try to get people to search for like Wayfair area rugs, Wayfair sofas, Wayfair this. And it ended up being super successful. And we were able to see like anything that had a substantial number of those compound searches, our rankings went up for the non-branded version of that. And I'm seeing, so that seems to be, that branded searches seems to be more important now from what I've seen than it was back like whatever it was 7-10 years ago when we ran that experiment. And it's a little frustrating. I remember, back in the day, SEOs were like, Google's favoring big brands, but it was really just Google favoring domain authority. And it's like, well, there's a way we can build domain authority. But now Google's, I think, looking for slightly tougher signals. I think Google's goal, right, is to get to a point where if you game Google, you're just doing good stuff, right? You're making a good site and you're doing good marketing. And so at some point the cost of driving that kind of branded searches starts to get pretty high. Usually not a problem if you're like already in the enterprise space. You're probably working with giant well-known brands, but if you're trying to compete as like a niche site that is better, that is just undeniably better, it's actually getting really hard to compete against those big enterprise sites that have that huge non-link related authority. I think that trajectory is going to continue.
And are you seeing anything that would enable folks to compete? Hey, I'm not as big of a site. I'm going up against larger authority sites. I think right now, literally right now, the pendulum has maybe publicly swung pretty far in that direction. I think maybe we might get like a little bit of a pendulum swing back, but to your point, I think the theme is there. How do you overcome that?
I think it's changes what keywords you're going to go after. So I agree with you. I think we went really far in one direction and Google's going to have to compensate somewhat. But where like a lot of the long tail stuff that used to be, a good niche site that was like really great at it could go after that long tail. A lot of that's going to these bigger, sometimes like just garbage sites like Forbes makes a throwaway article about whatever, how to train your mouse. And it's like, oh, they're ranking like the dedicated mouse training site with, 500 videos. But I do think that trying to build up sort of like these trust and expertise signals, which I don't think are really well understood by SEOs. But trying to build up some of those signals on like really topical expertise. And I think part of that is going to involve video. It seems, I think the future video is going to be a way of improving your sort of your topical expertise on some of these subjects. But I mean, if you're selling sneakers and you're like a niche site selling the best sneakers in the world, you're just never going to outrank, you know, Adidas and Nike and Amazon and everyone else. I think there is some of that that's just a lost cause, unfortunately. And it's, like I said, as an SEO, it's disappointing, but I think from Google's perspective, they see better results by ranking the sites people expect to see.
Yeah, open-ended to whomever to either add on, or, you know, where do you specifically think what's next, or what becomes more important over time in search?
Yeah, I think I'll take a little different direction, but it's something super foundational, but it's something that I'm seeing a lot of, which is just answering search intent. I encourage every SEO person that has access to GA4, Search Console, SEMrush, go back and look at your top performing pages from 3-4 years ago and compare them to when you were ranking number 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be. And now you're like, well, I'm in 56, position 50, 60. It doesn't even get traffic anymore, whatever it might be. And then look at the same search result, that same keyword now, and look what's different. So here's an extreme example, but this is a real example. If you had a blog post that was like, what are the 7 most common types of clouds or dogs or whatever, and you're just describing with really good long form text, well, it's long and white and puffy, it's in the sky and it whatever, that's every single kind of cloud, right? People are expecting visuals, and that's where SGE is going to. They're including a lot more visuals to answer right away. And then think about the whole search journey. So Derek's mentioned this quite a lot, right? Focus on the surfer itself. Stop chasing keyword gaps where it's just like, well, it's got search volume. Focus on fitting your full funnel with content that answers the search intent, and then link them together. So people oftentimes will take a blog and then link it to their product or their service page, which is, you know, the hub and spoke model that we're all familiar with, which is great. Take it one step further. Become a topical authority by linking the blogs that you wrote together, link those together, and then make them link up to your product and service pages. That's how you build topical authority. When Google's crawling your site, whether you get credit in SGE or just, you know, snippets or just traditional search, that's how you win. That's never going away. Google's an index, it crawls and spiders every page. Without internal links, if the content doesn't matter how good the content is, they're not going to find it. So another thing that people do is they'll write new blogs to link to older blogs, right? Like, oh, take those older blogs and link to the new blogs. It gets indexed faster. It's going to build more authority. And again, it's going to build that internal the EEAT. Whatever we think about it, I think that is one way you can kind of push the needle forward for maybe your campaigns. So refresh your content and answer search intent. It's going to be more visual. It's going to be more videos. Think about where Google's investing their money. Think about how the SERPs have evolved in the last couple of years. You can do a long tail keyword search and you'll find a video with chapters on YouTube, and it'll actually anchor text it right to that specific point in the video. It'll show passages. It'll show the snippet from there. It transcribes it. Google's got those capabilities. If you're not leveraging those kinds of things in your own strategy, you're missing out on a big piece of successful SEO.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting about it is that the definition, I wouldn't be surprised to see the common definition of what SEO is expand over time, because we're bringing all of these strategic understandings of how someone seeks knowledge on the internet. And that's basically been the area of specialties that so many folks have been focused on for a long time. And as the internet evolves, so does the mechanisms that someone seeks knowledge, and therefore so does the usefulness of being able to understand and appreciate how that operates and where it comes from and in what forms. I know at SearchTides we use value per word and value per second as basically KPIs depending on the media. And I know, Derek, you've really been focusing in on authenticity and just doing what you feel is right, because that's what's right, and that has been important, and that will continue to be important. So all of these, there's a real interesting kind of shift that's happening that we've all sort of been trained and or preparing for in terms of ushering in the new era of the internet, which, Ron, to your point, will also be incredibly similar to what it is today and what it has been yesterday. One last shout out to my mom. I guess if we wanted to make one sort of prediction that we thought was maybe a hot take for the future, what might something like that look like? It could be something that's SGE related, doesn't have to be. It could just be something that's search related also.
I'll take the first shot at it. I think CRO is going to be more and more important moving into the future of SGE, just because I think that keywords are going to become less, keyword tracking is going to become less accurate unless tools get way more expensive. So like if you are talking to a client or your board or whoever, now what's the deal with this keyword? Unless you have screenshots like daily, like, you know, we were here, maybe we're not there right now, but sometimes we are here recently. I think it's gonna be really tough. So what's gonna happen is the conversation is gonna change when it comes to SEO and how to drive value. And I think it's going to become a lot more encompassing of like omni-channel marketing or multiple forms of digital marketing in terms of the ROI and the ROAS conversations. Where right now it's really easy and clean to segment, and we kind of understand each channel's what it's worth, how it's driving. But I think those conversations are going to become a lot more intricate. And I think the organizations that have SEO and paid search under the same roof, whether that's with an agency or in-house or whatever, are going to have a step ahead of the competition, because the SEO team is going to be able to glean insights from the paid search campaigns. Because SGE is whatever it is, it's not going to roll out fully until they figure out how to monetize it really well. Mm-hmm. And that we're not there yet. So paid search is going to get impacted, in my opinion, before SEO. Mm-hmm. So again, it's gonna change the whole conversation. How do we drive value as SEOs? Traffic is gonna matter, right? 91% traffic is still on Google. We understand that, and Google has such a great monopoly on the paid search side of things because the organic is so strong. As soon as people start losing trust in the organic, it's going to impact the other side of the house for them. So it's going to come down to who's going to understand the data and be able to relay the data in between teams the fastest, and how are you going to make that swap in terms of your internal KPIs that you're driving value to. So, you know, if you have a leadership team that really understands digital marketing, then great. It's going to be a much easier conversation. If you're not in that situation where I'm just a business owner, I don't care about what you do, I just know you need to do it well, it's going to be a very intricate conversation to have, but you need to start planting those seeds now so that it doesn't seem like you're unprepared for when that day does come.
All right, my hot take is we are going to start moving away from Google. I started off by saying they're dominant. They still are. We're still searching in Google. We're going to move over to answer engines. And I've been very impressed with like the perplexity.ai of the world. There's a u.com, right? There are answer engines that are coming that they're better. After the Academy Awards, I went into one of the answer engines and I said, did Robert De Niro really mess up the Oscars? And I had real time the next morning, several citations from around the web information. I'm like, this is really cool. This isn't ChatGPT where you got to up the ante up to 4, you know, make sure you have the latest and greatest. This was available for free in their answer engine. And so, while I hate to say it as an SEO, I think that becomes more of our behavior as more people start learning about these answer engines. And we as SEOs will start this, what I heard yesterday, GEO, generative engine optimization. Right. So wrap your head around that. Another acronym for us to learn, but now we're going to start optimizing towards these answer engines.
Yeah, I think my take, I think, is very similar, which is Google is going to send substantially less traffic to websites in the future. And this has been Google's trend for a long time. Google spends a lot less traffic, smaller percentage of its traffic to sites now than it did 10 years ago. But I think in the near to medium future, we're going to see a big inflection point on that, where a lot more of that traffic stays on Google because Google's just going to give you the answer. You don't need to go anywhere else.
Mhm.
It is, I will say, going to be curious to see what kind of legislation comes out controlling AI. I kind of don't expect anything effective, but like you could see a world where like a super simple rule is, hey, if you're an AI company, you have to obey an AI line in robots.txt, right? You know, just robots.txt says AI, disallow. And like you are required by law to obey that if you're an AI company, and you're required that any data you buy obeys that. Again, I don't really have faith in effective legislation coming out anytime soon, right? Congress, you know, writing laws for yesterday's problems tomorrow. But I
What a line.
there
That
there
was good.
stole that one from Katie.
The banner. I also have another. There's also another Jaeger 2024, the next algorithm update. So we got some one-liners from today.
But so there is a possibility that something happens that sort of forces these large language models to somehow pay for the content they're consuming. Unlikely, but possible.
I would like to touch on a little bit of what everyone kind of alluded to as my hot take, which is this. I think it's important that you meet with your revenue abatement committees, I mean, legal teams at your companies, and have an honest, an upfront discussion about where search is going. Because if you don't think that people are going to start using LLMs for search, you're wrong. Open up Chrome. If you have Gemini, you'll see that it toggles between Gemini and Chrome already. They're trying to force people into the AI. Just open the Chrome on your phone and take a look. You'll see Gemini right there. Do you think the era of that is not rapidly approaching, and this position that companies are taking on putting disallow or in the robots.txt, you're trying to keep the open AIs and the Geminis of the world from crawling your site, but you're not thinking about it like a search engine has to crawl your site anyways? What is the balance there? So I understand that there's legislation, and especially things that affect like Wall Street Journal. If you're a print publication, these AIs consuming your stuff, can be quite taxing and take the value away from your publication and your writing and literally your business model. But does it make sense for retailers to be blocking the AIs? Eventually, people will be asking these questions to the AI, and you would want your product to surface there. And it is about getting this through. And the things that Ron had touched on, which is there's going to be, this giant hunk of cheese, which is all the traffic Google has. And there's all these disparate language models now and these answer generated models. They're coming to take a piece of it. So, to the practitioner, I say be conversational, be prepared to have content that does answer questions, but have a conversation with your legal department about the indexability of your sites in these long language models, because I think at some point those teams are going to have to change their position on this, or they're going to be left behind. And the companies that are choosing to block the AIs out right now are going to find themselves behind the eight ball when people do start using them to ask questions about products. Ultimately, and you heard this from everybody here, when Google figures out how to monetize it, and they will, okay, that's when it is going to be mainstream. And if you're one of the places trying to impede these AI models from digesting your site, you are going to be scrambling well after, because here comes everybody else that will democratize their information. And guess what? They're going to be the ones appearing in there. And that's maybe where you're going to see David fell Goliath. And I mean that some of these smaller retailers are going to have avenues into that for being more democratic with the content on their website, whereas some of these overreactionary companies are going to become IBM. They are literally going to be left behind. And it was like IBM was laughing at this thing called Windows, right? Just the same way people are like, these AIs are, they're never going to catch on. You're going to block all of them. Well, I don't know, give it 10 years. Tell me where you're at then, because it is going to be disparate. People are going to have their different language models, their different answers. So what you want is to be conversational and to answer questions surfers have. Be cognizant of search intent. Be honest with your AI content. And for the love of God, like, don't be one of those companies that's blocking everything from crawling you. It is not a long-term strategy that makes sense. Unless you're a news publication of some sort and you don't want your content being doled out for free, and I understand that, but at some point, the AI is coming and it's going to force a change there. So think about, rather than blocking it out, how you want to adapt to that, because blocking it out is literally the strategy of an ostrich, which
Yeah.
is to say, having your head in the hole in the ground.
I don't know. I don't know. I would counter for certain types of sites, including news sites, right? First of all,
Mhm.
caveat that right now there isn't an effective way to block AI companies from scraping all your stuff, and don't have a lot of confidence that one of those will appear. But companies like some of these big news companies that put up these payment gateways had huge drops in traffic and huge increases in revenue. And I think that's been pretty effective for them. And I can see it continuing to be effective in an AI world where they're like, hey, we don't want the AI to give the answers to this, reporting that we have. So far, that strategy, which I was a little dubious about personally, and I've been proven very wrong, that strategy has been very effective for those sites. I also think about sites like the biggest fear for me about the search generative experience is like, oh, what is that going to do to Wikipedia?
Mhm.
Excuse me, I think I just froze. It's like, what's that going to do to Wikipedia? Where Wikipedia content, like SGE summarizes Wikipedia better than Wikipedia summarizes Wikipedia. And I feel like half of Wikipedia's traffic could easily be replaced by just Google's little SGE snippet. So like, what do you do if you're Wikipedia? Do you just let that all go away along with, sort of the people who feel like they need to contribute to support Wikipedia? Yeah.
Brian, do you see an era where the Wikipedias and the Wall Street Journals and all the publishers of the world are just making a lot of money by selling their rights to all of these language models, and that's kind of the new normal, which is a sub-based model for all of these publishers and a whole new paradigm?
100% yes, semicolon, however, comma, that requires some way to stop the AIs from just taking it
Mhm.
for free, which currently doesn't exist.
And I think we're seeing kind of like a door number 3, which is just litigation, where,
Fair
you can
enough,
just
yeah.
make an argument. And so and just one thing I want to close on with everybody here. I think when in the SEO space, when there's conversations about AI and the future of search and how people will retrieve information online, a lot of times there's a fear around the status quo changing because it's this one big website that everybody comes to. And what happens if that stops being the case? And I think what everybody saw here today was a panelist crew of some folks that have a very deep understanding of how that system works today in its current structure, and also are without fear for what the future will bring, understanding that, again, the fundamentals of what's happening here on the internet, which is the furthering of knowledge of a human being, will continue. And in whatever format that is, there is an object to make sure that that's delivered in a way that's helpful for humanity and it's helpful at a human level. And that's where all this stuff is going. The mechanism is really irrelevant. So I want to just give a big thanks to everybody for joining today, to our esteemed panelists. This was a fascinating and really, really fun conversation. Thanks so much for letting us indulge and hear all of your expertise. For everybody listening, thanks so much for joining, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have a wonderful next era of search on the internet.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
everyone.